Hey everyone, I'm John Bozick with Electric Bike Report, and in today's video we'll be talking about the low step model of the Magnum Premium 3. As is typical on a folding e-bike, the Premium 3's frame includes a central hinge that allows it to split in half, as well as an extended stem that also folds to reduce the bike's overall height. This allows the bike to be stored in a closet or loaded into a trunk or RV so you can bring it along on an overnight camping trip or a week-long family vacation. In our experience, folding bikes often come with some sort of trade-off in comfort or performance, so our first question with the Premium 3 low step was, what, if anything, is a sacrifice here? We tested this bike thoroughly to find out, so stay tuned while we talk about its specs and components, and then we'll dive into its performance and test results. Before we get started, please take a moment to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. This helps support the channel and makes it easier for you to see more of our content when we upload new videos. We're always talking about awesome e-bikes like the Premium 3 here, and we'd love to help you find the one that's just right for you. One of the things we noticed first about the Magnum Premium 3 was its power. The bike ships as a Class 2 and 3 e-bike with a 500-watt rear hub motor, which tops out at a pedal-assisted speed of 25 miles per hour. It also includes a throttle that can bring you up to 20. Before my first ride, I honestly expected the bike to either struggle a bit above 20 miles per hour or feel a little sketchy if and when it did, but I was pleasantly surprised to see the speedometer hit that threshold and keep going. And I noticed how the bike felt really confident and stable at its top speed. Even more, I hopped on the bike before I saw its actual spec sheet, and with the amount of fun I had, I really thought I was riding a bike with a 750-watt motor. It just felt a lot more powerful. I also really enjoyed how comfortable the bike was. It comes with 3-inch diameter tires, which help to absorb some bumps, but the front suspension fork really makes a lot of difference. Our test bike also came with a suspension seat post that isn't included on the standard model, but the stock saddle does have a small integrated suspension and good padding, which will help to make for a more comfortable ride regardless. I took our test bike on some rough dirt paths during my testing, and it felt remarkably smooth, so I'd recommend getting a seat post with some squish if you're planning to ride in similar areas. But even without that, the Premium 3 includes a great level of comfort that just isn't present on all of the folding bikes out there. On top of that, the bike has an advertised range of 30 to 50 miles on a single charge, which is pretty solid for a single battery. The one used on the Premium 3 is a 48-volt 720 watt-hour battery that's definitely on the larger side for a folding e-bike. We put Magnum's claimed range to the test, so stick around for our range test section later to see how the bike stacked up. Let's start off by talking more about the main features of the Premium 3 low step, those being its folding mechanisms. Right here in the center of the frame, there's a hinge held together by a clamp lever, and that in turn is locked by a rotating plastic lock mechanism. To fold the bike, you need to lift up the kickstand and rotate the pedals out of the way. Then if you lift up that plastic lock, the clamp can be released, and then you can fold the frame in half and rest it on the little stand beneath the bottom bracket. The bike's stem also collapses by pressing down the metal lock button on the side, releasing the lever, and folding the top section down. The stem section is a pretty typical setup, and while the mechanism on the frame is a little slow, it functions just fine too. For us, it felt tight and secure, and we didn't notice any frame flex on the bike when riding around. It's worth noting that the Premium 3 weighs just over 62 pounds, which is a little on the heavy side for a folding e-bike, but the battery makes up 11 of those pounds, and it's pretty easy to remove. With the key in the lock, it just needs to be turned all the way to the right to the unlock position, and then the Premium 3's saddle has a great feature. You can just lift up on the lever beneath it to swing the seat up, and pull the battery right out with the included handle. A quick release lever for the seat post makes it easy to collapse or remove that portion of the bike for storage, and then when it's all folded up, the rest of the bike has dimensions of roughly 20 inches wide by 35 inches long by 27 inches tall. This brings up one of our only major points of critique for the Premium 3, and it's actually something that extends to most of the folding bikes we've tested. There is no strap or other sort of method to keep the folded halves of the bike together when you're lifting or moving it, so it kind of wants to swing open, and that can make the process a little challenging. Sure, you can pick up a bungee cord or something on Amazon, but I'd challenge Magnum to include a strap or some other solution with the bike that is more permanently attached. Moving on though, I mentioned the Premium 3's battery and motor already. I do want to point out that the rear hub motor is made by Bafeng, which is a common brand we see a lot of, so it's going to be reliable. The motor is actually integrated right into the rear cast alloy wheel. These wheels look super cool, and they're another feature we don't see too often. They're more rigid than hub and spoke wheels, which science says makes the bike a bit more stable and more energy efficient, but we're not sure you'll actually notice a ton of difference about that. We've got a 7-speed Shimano drivetrain with an Altus derailleur. The cassette steering range is 14 to 28 T, which isn't the widest range we've seen, but I thought it was adequate. We noticed a tiny bit of ghost pedaling around the bike's top speed, but it wasn't too much of an issue, and some faster pedaling compensated for it just fine. The bike's brakes are unbranded, but they are hydraulic disc brakes, which we always like to see, especially on a Class 3 e-bike. There's a 160 millimeter rotor on the back and a 180 millimeter rotor on the front, which gives the bike solid stopping power. We'll talk a bit more about that in the next brake test section though. I mentioned the Premium 3's front suspension fork earlier. This also doesn't show a brand, but it has 35 millimeters of travel. Not a lot, but it does make quite a bit of a difference. You can see, of course, that the bike has a few nice accessories like the fenders, headlight, and cargo rack. The rear tail light is mounted at the back end of the rack and also flashes when you hit the brakes. That cargo rack has a weight capacity of 55 pounds, which is about as much as 2 gold bars or 18 MacBook Pros. Not sure why you'd have all those, but hey, no judgment. Moving up to the front of the bike, there's one feature of the stem that we didn't talk about before, and that is the fact that it telescopes. Since the Premium 3 has only one frame size, it's really this and the 15-inch adjustment on the seat post that allows the bike to fit a pretty substantial range of riders. Magnum told us that they usually recommend it to riders between 5 feet and 6 feet in height, although I'm 5'11", and it seemed like there was still a bit of flexibility for riders who might be taller than me. Speaking of flexibility, just one thing to know about the Premium 3 and most folding bikes, and that's the extended plastic stem. This does have a tiny bit of flex to it, so it feels a little different, a little looser than a normal bike where the head tube comes up very close to the handlebars. As the stem telescopes out and gets taller, that feeling gets more pronounced. Again, not a problem, just something to be aware of if you haven't ridden a folding e-bike before. Let's wrap up this section by taking a look at the bike's cockpit. First, there's a centrally mounted black and white LCD display. This packs in quite a bit of information, but it's pretty well organized, although since we've started to see more color LCDs on bikes around the $2,000 mark, this setup does feel a little dated. The left handlebar has the front brake lever, the throttle lever, and the bike's control panel. I liked the throttle lever a lot. It's a unique component I haven't seen before, and it's comfortably to use for longer periods of time. Although for me, if it wasn't at the perfect angle, it did make it a little tougher to reach the button pad. I liked that panel too, though. It was small enough to be unobtrusive, but also large enough that my big thumb didn't have any trouble hitting the buttons. This brings up one of our only other major points of critique, and that is that the bike ships as a Class 3 e-bike, but can be adjusted to be a Class 1 or Class 2 through its settings menu. This can be accessed through the central mode button on the control panel, but from our understanding, you'll need to reach out to Magnum for a 4-digit access code in order to do this. The fact that the bike can be adjusted is great. We really like to see this, but most e-bikes we have tested with this feature ship as Class 2 e-bikes with both their throttle and pedal assisted speeds limited to 20 miles per hour. In general, slower speeds on any bike or vehicle have less inherent risk, and with e-bikes specifically, are more likely to be accepted on city-owned paths or trails. We'd prefer to either see the bike ship as a Class 2 with the passcode requirement to adjust it from there, or ship as a Class 3 with the passcode already included in the owner's manual. Getting back to the Premium 3's cockpit though, on the right side there's the rear brake lever and the Revo Shift twist shifter. I always like to see this style of shifter. It's really fast and easy to use. The one on our test bike was a little tight, but ultimately not a problem. And finally, the Premium 3 comes with these faux leather grips. I personally wasn't a huge fan of these. I noticed that they could feel a little slippery because they don't have a lot of texture, and they're also press fit with no way to tighten them down, so I noticed them moving around quite a bit on me. Fortunately, these should be pretty easy to replace if you run into the same issues though. With that out of the way, let's move on and talk about the Premium 3's test results and see how it stacked up. With the speeds at which e-bikes are capable of traveling, it is crucial that they have effective brakes. To evaluate brake systems, we pedal every e-bike we test up to 20 miles per hour and then hit the brakes to stop as quickly as we can while still maintaining control. We measured the distance it takes the bike to stop, repeat the process 2 more times, and then calculate an average stopping distance from those results. I mentioned earlier that the Premium 3's hydraulic disc brakes gave it good stopping power, although that was a bit of a lie. Despite not showing a brand, these brakes did great and gave the bike an average stopping distance of just 18 feet 11 inches. I'm sure the bike's weight played a role in this result, as well as the fact that its front rotor is 180 millimeters, but either way, this is the best brake performance we've seen on a folding e-bike so far. Even better, this result is shorter than our current running average of an even 19 feet, which encompasses all of the e-bikes we've tested. Without a brand name, we can't be sure if this performance would extend across the board on every Premium 3, but we were very impressed by what we saw here. For me personally, I noticed that the brakes, or rather the tires, tended to squeal pretty loudly when really clamping down, but the bike did feel nice and stable as it slowed. For our circuit test, we pedal every e-bike around a 1-mile loop made up of 4 right turns and a small 30-foot hill. We do this first with no assistance from the motor and then again in each pedal assist setting. This gives us an idea of the bike's motor engagement, its handling, and its speeds at those different PAS settings. So the Magnum Premium 3 uses a 5-stage pedal assist system with those settings labeled as Eco Mode, Tour Mode, Sport Mode, Turbo Mode, and Boost Mode. Before engaging the pedal assist system though, we made 1 lap using just our own leg power to pedal the bike. Many of the big and heavy non-folding e-bikes we've tested can be pretty difficult to pedal without motor assistance, but the Premium 3 moved like a champ, at least on flat ground. You really feel the bike 62 pounds on an incline, but if you're in a neighborhood or parking lot where the pavement is pretty flat, this bike is easy and fun to use as a traditional bicycle. Not only does this give you more flexibility in how you use it, it means that you won't be completely exhausted if you run out of battery power before you get back to wherever home base might be at the moment. There's a dip in our average speed between our human-powered lap and our first motor-assisted trip in Eco Mode that might seem unusual, but that relates to the way that our rider performed this test. See, many e-bikes like the Premium 3 that use cadence sensors don't really require much effort from the rider to function. Even if the pedals are spinning freely in first gear, the motor is going to move the bike as long as the cranks are turning. The motor will usually have different limitations on output and speed within each of its PAS settings, although the rider can still pedal faster. In the case of this bike, our rider approached things a little differently than usual to illustrate where the Premium 3's motor assistance stops for riders who might not want to put in a lot of additional effort. In my own testing, I noticed that the motor topped out in eco mode around 8 miles per hour, which jumped to about 11 miles per hour in tour mode, 15 in sport mode, 20 in turbo mode, and for me about 24 in boost mode, although this may vary for riders who weigh more or less. Overall, our average speed data reflects these numbers fairly well, with some leeway given for traveling slower uphill and around corners. We're mostly interested in the pattern though, which keeps a pretty linear shape across the board. What this means for you is that as you jump up through the bike's PAS settings, you're generally getting increases in power that make sense. Going from eco mode to tour mode isn't going to rocket you forward, it's just going to be a measured but noticeable boost. In terms of handling, the Premium 3 low step felt zippy and maneuverable thanks to its 20-inch wheels and 20 by 3-inch tires. Judging by their tread, these tires are definitely made more for the street and they had really good grip when cornering, but they actually handled dirt pretty well too. Our findings from this test showed that the Premium 3 had a good distribution of motor power throughout its PAS settings, smooth and consistent motor engagement, responsive handling, and a nice traditional bicycle feel, both without motor assistance and in its low PAS settings. We wouldn't mind seeing a little more power in PAS 1 and 2, but as it is, there's still plenty of flexibility. All of these features are ones that we really like to see, and we have to give Magnum kudos for doing a great job with them here. Our range test is actually 2 separate trials where we pedal the bike until its battery runs out. The first test is done in the lowest pedal assist setting that provides constant input from the motor, and the second is done with maximum assistance. For each test, we measure the distance the bike was able to travel, and we compare that to the range advertised by the bike's manufacturer. Considering that the Premium 3's lowest pedal assist setting offers only subtle assistance, we think most riders will likely use the next step up, tour mode, more frequently, so we tested the bike in that setting as well as in its most powerful, that being boost mode. Interestingly, Magnum did not perform any real-world testing of the Premium 3 to establish their estimated range of 30 to 50 miles. Instead, they used math to determine their figure based on the battery's watt-hour capacity and how many watts the bike uses per mile. For us, the Premium 3 covered just over 33 miles in boost mode and just over 55 miles in tour mode, which obviously lines up very closely with Magnum's estimate. We actually really appreciate that their estimate was conservative, especially considering that we tested the bike in tour mode instead of eco mode. It's always great to end up going farther than you expect. This range of about 30 to 50 miles is great for any e-bike and something that we think riders are really going to appreciate about this one, considering that it can fold up and pack away. If you're taking the Premium 3 with you on your adventures and you want to ride in an area where you don't have immediate access to an electrical outlet, you can rest pretty easy knowing that this amount of range and battery capacity is going to last for some long rides across multiple days. To test every bike's hill climbing ability, we take them to a local hill called Hellhole, which is a steep but paved path that's 1/3 of a mile long with an average grade of 12%. This is a pretty serious challenge for most e-bikes, and some that we test don't make it all the way to the top. We do this test both in the max pedal assist setting and with just the throttle to see if a bike has what it takes to make the climb. With just its throttle, the Premium 3 low step casually ambled up the path in 1 minute and 34 seconds with an average speed of 11.5 miles per hour. When we pedaled up the hill in boost mode, it jogged to the top in 1 minute and 17 seconds at an average of 14.1 miles per hour. If we compare this result to other folding e-bikes we've tested, the Premium 3's throttle result is good, but nothing special. It falls somewhere in the middle of our test results. The boost mode results, though, are great and definitely land the bike toward the front of the pack. With a 500 watt motor, the times and speeds we measured are absolutely solid, and the Premium 3's relatively low weight likely helped it out quite a bit. I'm about 25 pounds heavier than Justin, our rider for this test, and I rode the bike up the hill separately just to get a feel for it. It definitely struggled more with my extra weight, especially on just throttle power, but regardless, it still successfully crawled to the top, and again, I've got to give it props for that. Considering how extreme Hellhole is, if the Premium 3 handled that as well as it did, it shouldn't have any trouble on smaller hills unless it's really loaded up close to its maximum weight capacity. If I'm being completely honest, I did not expect such great performance from the Magnum Premium 3. That's nothing to do with the company specifically, but more because it does seem that folding e-bikes often have to make some compromises that full-size, non-folding bikes don't need to worry themselves with. In this case, I'm seriously happy to have learned that I was wrong. I thoroughly enjoyed riding this bike, and I think that it does a really good job of balancing all the things it's trying to do. We'd love to see some method of securing the two halves of the bike to prevent it from swinging back open when you're trying to move it. But again, this is something that isn't specific to the Premium 3 and something that we see and critique pretty often on folding bikes. Additionally, while we appreciate the fact that its class can be adjusted through its settings menu, we think it would be better to unlock it to higher speeds instead of lower speeds, or at the very least just have a more accessible passcode in the bike's user manual. That said, the Premium 3 proved itself to be highly capable just as a standard e-bike, which is made even better by the fact that it folds. It's powerful, it's comfortable, it can go the distance, it can stop on a dime, and it handles itself well in just about any environment. This makes it all the more fun and useful as a traveling companion, and I think it'll serve you well on your adventures out in the world. One final point, we do want to acknowledge the fact that the Premium 3 comes with a higher price tag than some of the similarly spec'd folding bikes we've reviewed. Affordability is great, but so is being able to take your bike to a shop where the mechanic is familiar with your specific model. Magnum has a network of shops across the US, so some of that added cost goes into backing up those locations and providing you with more reliable service and support. The company does ship direct to consumers though, in case you don't have a Magnum dealer nearby. We'll leave a link to Magnum's website in the video description so you can check current pricing on the Premium 3 and pick one up for yourself. Thanks for sticking with me through this review. If you'd like to read more about our experiences on the bike, please check out the other link in the video description, which will take you to our written review at electricbikereport.com. Before we go, if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really does help us to grow and share more content. We'd love to hear from you in the comments section too, so let us know if you have any questions and what you thought about our review. That's all for today. Again, I'm John with Electric Bike Report, and this is the low step model of the Magnum Premium 3.